They say every villain was once a victim, but what if that victim was trained to be a monster long before he even knew it? Jaguar Wright is back, and this time, she is not holding anything back. In her latest interview, she has dropped a bomb so heavy, the internet can barely keep up. Twitter threads, YouTube reactions, TikTok breakdowns, everyone is talking. Because what she said might finally explain how Diddy became hip-hop's ultimate boogeyman. But this story does not start with Diddy. No, it starts decades earlier, in the shadowy streets of Harlem. It starts with the man who raised him, and the secrets that man kept buried. Jaguar didn't just throw shade, she opened a door that most people were too afraid to touch. When she was asked if Diddy was ever a victim before becoming a predator, she brought up one name that changed everything, Dapper Dan. And if you know Dan, you know that when he talks, he's not speaking gossip, he's giving you history from the front lines. Dapper Dan was not just some tailor. He was the designer of Harlem royalty, dressing legends, hustlers, and kingpins alike. He knew the streets. He knew the deals. And yes, he knew Diddy's father, Melvin Combs. Back when Melvin was working under the notorious drug lord Frank Lucas, Dapper Dan saw things most people only whisper about. And now, those whispers are starting to sound like screams. According to Dan, what we are seeing with Diddy today, the chaos, the darkness, the manipulation, it did not start with him. It was inherited. Passed down like a curse. But here's where things get twisted. Depending on who you ask, Melvin Combs was either a Harlem legend, a government informant, or both. Some call him a street hero, others a sellout. The truth? It might be worse than either. Melvin was knee-deep in the Harlem underworld during the 1970s, a time when crime and corruption weren't just common, they were currency. And then there was Frank Lucas. A man so powerful, his name still echoes through hip-hop lore. He built one of the most dangerous empires in America, and Melvin Combs was right there beside him. Lucas didn't play by the rules, he made his own. He smuggled heroin straight from Southeast Asia, cutting out every middleman in the game. It was brilliance and brutality rolled into one. And in that same world, little Sean Combs, Diddy, was growing up. Watching. Absorbing. Learning how power works. So when Jaguar Wright connects those dots, when she says Diddy did not just become who he is, he was made that way, the internet loses its mind. Comment sections explode. Fans argue. Old interviews resurface. Everyone wants to know, was this all fate, or was it a setup from the start? Because if what Jaguar and Dapper Dan are saying is true, then the story of Diddy is not about fame. It's about inheritance, of fear, of manipulation, of darkness. And the scariest part? This might just be the beginning. And this is where the story takes a turn that nobody was ready for. Because when people talk about Frank Lucas, the Harlem kingpin immortalized by Denzel Washington in American Gangster, they forget how far he was willing to go for his empire. During the Vietnam War, while American soldiers were dying overseas, Lucas allegedly used their coffins to smuggle pure heroin into the United States. Let that sink in. Coffins. Fallen soldiers. Smuggling drugs beneath the flag they died for. That was the level of darkness running through Harlem's underbelly, and that was the world that shaped Melvin Combs, the man who would one day father Diddy. Lucas' operation wasn't just criminal, it was genius in its coldness. By cutting out the middlemen and going straight to Southeast Asia's Golden Triangle, he sold a purer product at half the price. Money flowed like water. Millions every single week. Power. Greed. Blood. But empires built on betrayal never last. In 1976, Lucas was finally caught and handed a 70-year sentence. And this is where the pattern begins. Because just like his future protege, Lucas did not take the fall. He flipped. He became an informant, feeding the feds everything they wanted to know about dirty cops, drug lords, and politicians. In return? 5 years. Just 5 years for a man who ran one of the biggest criminal networks in America. After his release, he and his family were tucked away in the witness protection program, safe, silent, invisible. And right in the middle of that chaotic web was Melvin Combs. Years later, when Frank Lucas died in 2019, one of his old interviews resurfaced online. The internet went crazy, Reddit threads, podcasts, Twitter conspiracies, because in that interview, Lucas casually mentioned Melvin. He talked about their friendship, their business, and yes, about meeting a young Sean Combs, long before the world called him Diddy. According to Lucas, Melvin wasn't just hanging around. He was moving product, managing shipments across New York. But then something went wrong, loyalty. Cracked. Melvin flipped too, allegedly cooperating with the same feds who once protected Lucas. And that decision? It cost him everything. One night, sitting quietly in his car, Melvin Combs was executed. No witnesses. No official record. Just whispers in Harlem's dark alleys. Diddy was only 3 years old. But here's where things start to spiral. After Melvin's death, Diddy's mother told him it was a car accident. Imagine growing up believing your father died on the road, only to find out years later he was murdered for being a snitch. Diddy discovered the truth not through family, not through confession, but by accident. In a college library, searching his father's name. One search. One headline. One revelation that shattered everything he thought he knew. Lies. Betrayal. Manipulation. That was the environment that raised Sean Combs. A home where truth was optional, and power was the only constant. And if the rumors are true, if Melvin really was an informant, then those government connections didn't just die with him. They transferred. They became part of Diddy's DNA. His protection. His immunity. How else do you explain decades of chaos, lawsuits, raids, and allegations, and yet he always walks away untouched? Even his former bodyguard, Gene Deal, once claimed that Diddy nearly suffered the same fate as his father. That fateful night in March 1997, when Biggie Smalls was gunned down in Los Angeles, Gene swears the target was never Biggie. It was Diddy. He warned him. He begged him not to go. But Diddy ignored him. Shrugged it off. And that one arrogant move changed hip-hop history forever. Biggie died. Diddy lived. And from that moment on, whispers grew louder. Had Diddy played both sides? Was he snitching? Was he protected? Gene Deal says yes, that Diddy has always been a double agent, a master manipulator who knows how to play the game better than anyone else. And maybe that is why, no matter how deep the scandals go, from blackmail to trafficking rumors, Diddy always survives. Every time the walls close in, someone opens a door for him. Even now, after everything exposed, federal investigations, viral survivor testimonies, leaked footage, Diddy gets only 4 years. And just when the world begins to question how, boom, a headline drops. Donald Trump reportedly stepping in to pardon him. Twitter explodes. Instagram reels. How deep does this go, fans ask. Who is protecting him? And the answer may not be Diddy at all. Because behind every empire is someone more powerful pulling the strings. And in Diddy's case, that might just be his mother, Janice Combs. The whispers about her go beyond Hollywood gossip. Some former bad boy artists claim she was the real architect behind Diddy's empire. Allegedly, Janice ran an escort operation masked as beauty pageants, wild adult parties behind closed doors while little Diddy watched from the staircase. The kind of trauma that reshapes how a boy sees women, love, and control. Mays once said Janice holds all the receipts, every transaction, every secret. And Freddie P? He took it further. Called her the devil. Claimed she was behind the rituals, the darker side of fame that artists keep hinting at but never name outright. And maybe, that explains it all. Because when a child grows up surrounded by lies, deceit, power, and seduction, what does he become? A businessman? A survivor? Or something much darker? The internet is still piecing it together, but one thing is clear, this story is not just about hip-hop. It is about inheritance. A family legacy soaked in manipulation, loyalty traded for leverage, and a son who learned too well how to play both sides. And if Jaguar Wright is right, this entire saga is not the end. It is the beginning of the fall of an empire built on secrets. Imagine being a child surrounded by flashing lights, booming music, and adults lost in chaos. Not love. Not laughter. Chaos. The kind that stains you. The kind that plants confusion where innocence should live. Psychologists call it environmental trauma. But what it really means is, your soul starts learning all the wrong lessons. You start mistaking fear for respect, control for love, and pain for normalcy. And when you look at Diddy's life, his empire, his relationships, his obsession with dominance, suddenly, it does not seem random. It seems inevitable. People close to the family paint a haunting picture of Janice Combs. A woman as magnetic as she was menacing. They said she could make anyone feel special, until she no longer needed them. Then she'd turn cold, sharp, calculating. The beauty pageants she ran were allegedly just a mask. Behind those glamorous curtains was something far darker, a network of powerful people, moving money, influence, and bodies like chess pieces. Young girls lured with promises of fame and opportunity allegedly found themselves trapped in a cycle of exploitation, surrounded by drugs, alcohol, and manipulation. And through it all, a young Sean Combs watched. Not just as a bystander, but as a student. When Diddy later bragged about hustling on the streets at 12, the world saw ambition. But what if that was not ambition at all? What if it was escape? What if the hustle was the only way he could outrun what he saw at home, the noise, the lies, the things no child should have to understand? He once said, "My mom did what she had to do." Most took it as admiration. But listen closely, that line sounds like survival disguised as gratitude. Maybe he loved her. Maybe he feared her. Maybe both. Maybe watching her manipulate men, control rooms, and silence threats taught him the most dangerous lesson of all, that in this world, love is a transaction and power is the only real protection. And if that is the truth, then everything Diddy became, the mogul, the manipulator, the untouchable king of chaos, was not born, but bred. Friends and ex-associates have said for years that Diddy's energy feels heavy. Like he's haunted, one insider whispered. Others described the same pattern: charm first, control next. He would build you up, then break you down, just to prove he could. That kind of behavior does not come from nowhere, it comes from watching someone master it. They say Janice was his hero, and his trauma. The woman who taught him how to rise above everyone else, but never how to be human while doing it. Some even claim that no matter how rich or powerful he became, he never truly escaped her orbit. She was always the voice behind the curtain, the shadow in his decisions. Watch his old interviews. Listen carefully. 1 minute, he praises her as the strongest woman alive. The next, he sounds defensive, like he's trying to convince himself that loving her wasn't the same as fearing her. And then there are the whispers. The ones that never die. Freddie P. once called Janice the devil. People laughed, until they heard the tone in his voice. That wasn't anger, that was fear. Real fear. The kind only survivors understand. Because when you are dealing with true manipulators, the weapon isn't violence, it's control. They do not need to hurt you to destroy you, they make you destroy yourself. Multiple insiders have hinted that Janice keeps files. Not memories, leverage. Photos. Contracts. Videos. Receipts. Every secret, every transaction, every name. Her safety net is silence, and her silence is power. One former assistant reportedly said, when things got messy, Janice made them disappear. And in that world, disappearance doesn't always mean death. Sometimes it just means you never speak again. And maybe, that's the real secret of Diddy's longevity. Not money. Not luck. But fear. The fear that comes from knowing there are people who can end you, with one phone call, one file, one truth. So what if Diddy isn't untouchable because he is powerful? What if he is untouchable because everyone else is terrified of the woman standing behind him? Because if Janice Combs truly holds the keys to every locked door in Diddy's empire, then the story of Sean Combs isn't about fame, or fortune, or even crime. It's about a son still living in his mother's shadow, a man built from broken lessons, haunted by the ghosts of a house that never stopped playing music, even as the walls fell silent. And if you listen closely, you can still hear the echo of that chaos, in every scandal, every betrayal, and every desperate attempt to stay on top. The party never ended. It just moved to a bigger house. Strip away the fame. Strip away the money, the mansions, the lights. What remains is not a mogul, but a wound. A story carved out of survival, trauma, and a love so twisted it turned into control. This is not just about Diddy the celebrity. This is about Sean Combs, the little boy who grew up in the House of Mirrors, and never found his way out. Because when you look closely, what you see is not ambition, it is inheritance. A mother who learned to survive by manipulating power. A son who learned to control to survive her. If the stories are true, Janice Combs was not simply a mother, she was a teacher in disguise. She taught her son how to smile while hiding a secret. How to charm while plotting control. How to use pain as a currency. And Sean learned every lesson perfectly. He built an empire on those teachings, one deal, one artist, one betrayal at a time. But empires built on pain always collapse. Always. Watch his old interviews, the ones where he laughs too hard, smiles too long, and talks too fast. You can see it in his eyes. That flicker. That split second when the performance cracks and a frightened child looks back at you. The one who learned to dance before he ever learned how to cry. The one who replaced safety with control, because control was the only form of love he ever understood. Maybe that is why he throws the parties. Maybe that is why he surrounds himself with noise. Because silence is where the ghosts live, and he has too many to face alone. And then there is Janice. The woman behind the curtain. The mother, the myth, the warning. People close to her say she was beautiful, but terrifyingly strategic. She could make you feel like the center of the universe, right before she turned you into her next pawn. Allegedly, she sent Diddy to an all-boys school, not to protect him, but to own him. To make sure no woman came close enough to take her place. That is not protection. That is possession dressed as care. And those old videos, the ones people brushed off as weird but harmless? They look different now. The public kisses on the mouth. The matching outfits. The overly intimate gestures. It was not affection. It was conditioning. A silent message that said, "You belong to me." What the world called love was really control wearing perfume. Even the small details, the matching nail polish, the 4 drips, the strip club appearances, they feel less like quirks and more like rituals. Rehearsed performances blurring the line between mother and son, parent and partner. A world where boundaries did not exist. Where Diddy was never allowed to just be, only to become whatever reflection his mother needed that day. Psychologists say that when a child grows up under that kind of power, they do not just mimic it, they internalize it. They become the very thing that hurt them. That is the real tragedy here. Because when Diddy controls others, when he manipulates loyalty, when he confuses love with dominance, he is not just acting out of arrogance. He is repeating what he was taught, that affection is leverage, and love without control is weakness. That is why this story is so haunting. Not because it is about fame or money, but because it is about a broken cycle, one that began long before Diddy was born. Dapper Dan once said, "This did not start with Diddy." And he was right. Trauma is inherited. Silence becomes culture. Fear becomes love. Janice might have been a victim of her own conditioning too, someone who learned to weaponize love because love without power never protected her. So she held on. To her image. To her influence. To her son. But holding on too tightly can destroy everything you touch. And somewhere in that mansion of mirrors, a boy stopped being a boy, and became the man the world now fears. Maybe that is the cruelest legacy of all, not the fame, not the money, not the scandals. But the idea that the greatest predator hip-hop ever knew was once just a little boy who only wanted his mother's love, and never stopped trying to earn it. When you strip away the fame, the luxury, the chaos, what you are left with is not a mogul. You are left with a wound that learned how to talk. Because families do not just pass down names and features, they pass down pain. The same way Sean Combs inherited his mother's beauty, drive, and ambition, he also inherited her shadows. That is why his story feels like déjà vu. It is the same haunting melody we have heard for generations, a parent who loves too much, too wrong. A child who mistakes control for affection. And one day, that child grows into the very monster they once feared. The white nail polish, people laughed, called it style. But symbols tell stories. White, the color of purity, but also of ritual. Matching nails, matching energy, matching mindsets. It was not fashion, it was declaration. No woman will ever come between us. And as Diddy grew older, he carried that same possessive rhythm into every connection he made. Look closely, the way he isolates, dominates, controls, it is not random. It is a reflection. Janice's reflection. Her fingerprints are still on the man he became. People praise Diddy's empire, but they never question its foundation. A foundation built on blurred boundaries and emotional confusion. When love and control are the same language, affection becomes a transaction, and every relationship turns into a power struggle. Dapper Dan's words echo like prophecy, it did not start with Diddy. Because this is not about one man, it is about inheritance. The kind that does not come through DNA, but through wounds that never healed. And here is the cruel truth, the more power he gained, the emptier he became. Because power cannot replace love. Control cannot cure loneliness. Fame is just another wall, built to keep the world out, and the pain in. Maybe Janice never meant to hurt her son. Maybe she thought she was saving him. Protecting him from a world that never cared enough. But in trying to shield him, she caged him. She blurred the lines until love became ownership and affection became control. That is how